Aloha, welcome everybody. All right, so today, as I promised, I've been talking about it for a while already. I wanted to do a breakdown of the different food kingdoms, and this is how I break it down. Right, there's 5 food kingdoms, and I want to talk about all different ones, and even show you guys some examples that we got right here. That most of the stuff is local from here, but I just wanted to talk about each kingdom and how it's relevant. So I guess we'll just start, because we're recording this on the phone, so this will be up on YouTube as well. And right now we're live on my Instagram. I go by Quetzacoatl, and this is what I'm teaching today, the 5 food kingdoms. All right, so let's get into it. The first kingdom that it's not really a kingdom, but I consider it a kingdom because I think that it's important, is the elements, the 4 elements. The sun, the wind, the earth, and the water, right? Now the sun is important. We all know about the sun. It's very important for our health as far as giving us certain hormones. And if you don't have sun, like, you're gonna be deficient in something. If you're not getting adequate amount of sunlight, you're just not gonna be as healthy of a human being as you possibly could. So the sun is important, and you're gonna notice that all these elements, they play a role in all these kingdoms. So the sun gives life to a lot of these, especially when we talk about bacteria and plant. So the sun is very important for our own health. We don't think about nutrition from the elements, but we are actually getting some sort of nutrition that's fortifying our bodies when we're talking about the elements. So you can directly get some sort of benefit without it having to go through a plant. And some of the ways that the sun does that is through cholesterol on our skin, and generating vitamin D hormone, and playing a crucial role in our immune system. So if we don't have the sun, we're definitely going to be lacking a part of our health that we should be experiencing. And when it comes to the wind, I think in terms of oxygen, in terms of the air you breathe, how healthy is the air you breathe? Like, I know we're living in different parts of the world, especially when we were in Mexico City, the air was very polluted. Mexico City is actually one of the most polluted cities in the world. So when we were there and then flying here to Hawaii, it was like a huge difference. Like, as soon as we got off the plane, we took a deep breath and we like, damn, this is different here. It was a whole different vibe. So I know that the oxygen in the air that we breathe is very crucial for our health as well, because we're breathing in, either we could be breathing in toxicity, or we could be breathing in oxygen, pure, clean oxygen that's actually nourishing to our bodies. A lot of times we don't think about air quality, especially if you're indoors a lot, like, you're not getting that fresh air. Like right now there's a breeze that's just coming through. It feels actually amazing. But that's letting me know that there's a flow of energy in this place where we're at. Inside the house, I wouldn't be feeling this breeze that I feel right now, but that's moving, and the air actually is also responsible for pollinating a lot of plants. So it has a symbiotic relationship with the plants, because it's helping to spread the seed of a lot of these plants. So that's a very crucial thing for our health as well. The fresh air, we want to have fresh air at all times. You can get stuff for your indoors, like air filters and stuff like that could help you for indoors, and that could be a benefit as well. The earth, the earth, when I'm talking about the earth, I'm talking about the soil, I'm talking about minerals, I'm talking about things that you could take from the earth and put it to your body to nourish you. Like, for instance, one of the examples I have here is salt. This is Himalayan salt. Like, you wouldn't think of this, but this is from the earth element. This is salt that is mined from the earth, and we take it as a food source. And people might think it's just, well, you just flavoring the food and stuff, but no, it's actually a food source, because it's got minerals inside of it. It's got upwards of 80-90 minerals inside of the salt. The most prevalent mineral is, yes, it's the sodium, but it's still got the other minerals in there, and that's very important. Some animals, like if you have a farm, if you're familiar with farming, like goats and cows and stuff, and horses, they have salt licks, because without the salt lick, they actually, their diet is lacking, and they get a lot of nutrition from the salt. So that's one component that you need to know about if you're raising animals, that the salt is very important to these mammals. So if it's important to them, and if it's in their diet, then that's a component that we want to utilize as well. So all these things that I'm talking about today, they're all going to be available in your environment. They might not be the exact same type of fruits and vegetables and animal products and all this, but there's a variety for wherever you're at. So that's the beautiful thing about this. It's universal. No matter where you're at, you can find all these different types of foods, so talk about the water. The water is very crucial. It's one of the most crucial components for me personally, because I know that our quality of water is super lacking. Like, I know we come from a place where it was chlorinated, fluoridated, got pharmaceuticals in it, got all kinds of things in it, and most of us don't really know or understand what pure water is. And so that's a very crucial component when it comes to health. For me, water is super, super crucial, because you want to stay hydrated. But if you're just hydrating your body with any type of water, you're not really doing yourself a service. It's like on one end you're hydrating yourself, but what are you hydrating yourself with? Because that's all becoming a part of your body. So you want to integrate things into your being that are pure, that are whole, that are organic, and that aren't tainted. So when it comes to water, like, I know people talk about the spring water, talk about the Kangen, different machines, but there's so many components to just water, and I could do a video alone on just water. But the basics are that you want water that's structured, you want water that's mineralized, you want water that's pure, that's free, acid free, and you want it to be have minerals in it, have some sort of minerals in it. You don't want distilled water is water with no minerals. And people talk about water being conductive, but water isn't conductive by itself. What makes water conductive is the minerals in it. So it has to have a little bit of earth in the water to actually make it conductive. The earth is the minerals. So there's many components to water. I won't talk about that today, but just know you get yourself some good quality drinking water, or a good ass filter. One filter that I recommend is from Pristine Hydro. And if you have any questions about that, hit me up in my inbox. But that's the one I used to have, back in the States, and that one really worked for me. All right, so let's get into the actual food stuff that we put into our body. First kingdom I want to talk about is the bacteria kingdom. Okay, now this includes foods like spirulina, chlorella, blue-green algae, and fermented foods. Now, we might not even think about bacteria as a kingdom, but it's everywhere. Bacteria is everywhere. So when we talk about foods that come from bacteria, we're talking about bacteria cultures. So, people don't think about it this way, but if you have a fermented food, that's a farm. You're farming bacteria. You're actually literally farming microscopic organisms. It might not be like a huge farm like you see and you think of traditionally, but it's actually you're farming cultures of bacteria. So that's what fermented foods are. Like, you're basically getting a food and you're preserving it, but at the same time you're multiplying a certain kind of bacteria in it, and that could be beneficial for your health. Most ancient cultures or traditional cultures, they had practiced some sort of fermentation. Fermentation doesn't always got to be like for months on end. You could ferment something from one day to the next depending on what climate you're in. Like here in the tropics, if I put coconut milk, don't last but 2 days in the fridge before it starts fermenting. So that doesn't take very long to ferment. If I left it out in 1 day, it will be fermented for sure. So it's not about things that take a long time, but even foods that for one night you left it over, like some of the traditional Polynesians, one of the foods that they ferment is breadfruit. Like when it's really ripe, they ferment it for 1 day and then they cook it. You might not think of that fermentation, but that's a process that they put the food through in order to make certain nutrients more available, So, that's the bacteria kingdom. Think of it as microscopic single cell organisms, but in big numbers they become a food source. Like spirulina, the Aztecs used it as a protein source because some of the lakes around there produce a lot of this bacteria enough to collect it and utilize it as a food source for the community. And like this is what we have here. Spirulina is the Hawaiian spirulina. This is spirulina that's collected here in Hawaii, and we take it, we put it in smoothies, and it's one of the food sources from the bacteria kingdom that we like to eat and take into our body. And it has a lot of minerals in it, antioxidants, and just stuff that's beneficial for you. The purer, the better. Like with all these things, one of the things that I want to say is that you want to make sure that it's pure, that it's organic, and that is just the least processed possible, fresh, local. And that's what we try to aim for every single day. Another thing that I forgot to mention is this is another earth element, shilajit. It's a mineral pitch from the Himalayas, and it's actually a very powerful superfood, but it's basically just a bunch of minerals ground up, and it's just decomposed matter, millions of years old. But that's where all the nutrition is at, because through the decomposition process, a lot of things become bioavailable, and through time, it becomes condensed into a mineral form that we have access to nowadays. So you can put this in smoothies. I put it in my local coffee that I drink, and teas and stuff like that. Okay, so let's move on from the bacteria kingdom. But what I want you to get is that that's bacteria, single cell organisms, and that's a food source that we could tap into. Not very popular because it doesn't generate a big amount of food, but still, it's a food source. So next, let's talk about plants. If we just pan the camera, we can see plants are everywhere, you know. Plants make up the majority of what we could visibly see. And, you know, that's a big food source that I think we should have in our diet as probably a big main part of our diet should be coming from plants. Things like fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, roots and tubers, herbs, even edible flowers and spices. This is all the plant kingdom. You know, it's a lot of stuff in the plant kingdom that is beneficial for our health. You know, especially with a lot of the herbs. You know, we take these herbs as medicine, but really they're supposed to be just regular parts of our food, and we should just be throwing them in our dishes when we in tune with the local environment. Every local environment is going to have different herbs. There's herbs that exist here in Hawaii that don't exist anywhere else in the world, and probably where you're at, there's herbs that exist that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And actually, one of the few times that I took a herbal supplement was here in Hawaii, and that's the first time I really felt something from a supplement. But it was a tincture that they used to give to the Hawaiian king. It was herbs that only like the royalty, basically, Hawaii had access to, and it was powerful. It was potent. Like you could feel it on my body. I could feel it, and so I know that these plants play a special role in our nutrition. And you want to get things that are seasonal. Like the thing about plants and the thing about all of this is not available all the time. That's why you got to be aware of the different kingdoms, because when one's not available, you got to have the ability to go to another kingdom, to eat from another kingdom, and you know, just play it like that from what's happening in your environment. Because nowadays we have grocery stores and we have the luxury of getting food year round, but that's not a realistic idea or concept in nature. Everything is seasonal and everything has a cycle to it. So, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing for me. Like when a certain fruit is fruiting, like this cacao, it doesn't, I mean, this actually here in Hawaii, it does give year round, but you know, other places it doesn't give year round, but just when it gives, it makes it even more special when you do get to enjoy that food, rather than having it all the time. It just kind of takes away some of that, you know, some of that, just making it relevant and significant, some of that significance. So yeah, man, nuts and seeds, a lot of those you want to sprout and make sure that you know, you're eating them in forms that are more digestible, because the thing with a lot of plants is that they got anti-nutrients. So you'll hear people talk about anti-nutrients. So a lot of plants have developed defenses against mammals and against, like us humans, that we eat them. They develop defenses because they want to preserve themselves. You know, just like everything in nature, self-preservation is a imminent law that everything practices. So you got to know how to handle every plant. Some plants need processing. Some plants you can't eat them raw. You can't eat everything raw. So when things aren't available that you could eat raw, you got to be able to know how to process the stuff, like the roots and you know, like a potato and starches like that, and make them more edible. You know, so that's one thing I want to mention about plants, that they do contain a lot of anti-nutrients many times, and that you have to be aware of that. So process them in a way that will allow you to eat that food source. Okay, I think I'm done with the plants. Talk about fungal, because I want to save some time for like questions. The fungal kingdom, right? And I know, you know, people talk about yeast and it's like, oh, this big thing, but yeast is one of the things that's used to leaven bread, to make bread rise, and is used in, you know, other types of processing of foods. And one thing I want to say, the word processing has been basically distorted. We talk about don't eat processed food, but a lot of the food that exists in nature and that we make usable, we have to go take it through some sort of process to make it edible. So you want to minimize the processing, or you want to process it yourself to make it as freshly processed as possible. But don't be scared of the word process, but better understand it. understand what that word really means, but processing just means that you're putting it through. Like if I make a smoothie and I blend it up, that's a process right there. I process that with a blender to make it, but that don't make it unhealthy. It just makes it, that's by definition what I put it through. But the least processed the better, because typically the more processed the food is, the more the additives it has and preservatives it has. And so you want to process the food yourself, get it as fresh possible in its raw, natural form, and then you process it. You be the one that processes it instead of somebody else process it, because you don't know how they're going to process it and you don't know what they're going to do to it in that process. So with the fungal, we got things like truffles. You can make oils from truffle oils. We got things like mushrooms. You got the oyster, the cremini, all these different types of mushrooms that are just delicious edible mushrooms. And the fungal kingdom is actually more closely related to the animal kingdom than it is to the plants. The thing about plants is that the beautiful thing, I think, one of the lessons that I get from plants is that they attract everything to them. They sit still and everything comes to them. They pull minerals, they get water, they get sunlight, and they just kind of sit in there and everything's coming to them. With the fungal kingdom, they have a way to move. So they do movement through the different channels underground. The mycelium networks, that's how they move, And so they do get nutrition through breaking down and decomposing things. So they have enzymatic process where they break things down. That's how the fungal kingdom gets its nutrition, So beer and wine sometimes are used, like certain funguses are used to ferment the beers and wines. This right here, Quetzacoatl, is a fungus that grows on the corn, and traditionally the people of ancient Mesoamerica, they ate that. It was a delicacy, and it still is a delicacy. You go to Mexico and they sell it at the grocery store. Like it's literally called corn smut in English, but it's a fungus that grows on the corn, but it's a delicacy in those areas. So you see that they tapped into that food source. Nowadays we're so scared, like, it's nasty, that's fungus. But a lot of these ancient cultures, they were so intimate with their environment that they were using this as a food source, and they were thriving off of that. So that's the fungal kingdom. It's nothing to be scared of. And along with this, we have like psychedelics and stuff like this. I know we talk a lot about, in spiritual community, it's a lot of talking about psychedelic experiences, but and those do fall into the fungal kingdom. But I'm talking about as food sources, like everyday things to just eat for nutrition. These are some of the things that you might tap into as far as the fungal kingdom. All right, so let's just finish it off with the animal kingdom. So the animal kingdom is another big, what I want you to think about when I think about the animal kingdom is think about condensed energy. Plants, yeah, they exist everywhere and they're really prolific everywhere and they're easy to spot, but the energy that they hold isn't as great as an animal. Animal is a condensed energy because animals are eating the plants all day. So when you think of animal foods, think of condensed energy, think of condensed nutrition, think of stuff that will take you longer and that will concentrate. It's concentrating nutrition, and it concentrates in a lot of the organs and the tissues. And to be honest, the tissues and what we eat nowadays, like steak and all the tissue meats, they weren't very popular for these ancient cultures. Not as popular as the organ meats, because the organ meats held more nutrition. When women were pregnant and they needed extra nutrition to feed that child that they were, that was inside of them growing, they gave the woman animal liver, because they understood that there were certain nutrients concentrated in certain amounts that could help that child. So when we're thinking about growing a body and coming from a small stage, like as a baby, and growing that, and even if you get hurt and building, or even if you're at the gym working out, you got to think about the structure, what creates that structure. Animal foods are very important and easy to create that structure with, and it's not the same as plant, because I've seen it for myself that the structure that plant protein creates is not the same muscle. I've experienced it and I've seen it on myself and others, that is a different type of muscle. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it's just a different type of muscle. Animal foods provide more of a structure for your muscles, by the very nature of the proteins. They're just more, they're more there's tougher, stronger proteins that you can't get from the plant kingdom. It's just a different type of protein. I'm not saying that this one's bad or anything like that. I'm just saying it's different. You have to understand that, because a lot of the confusion is that, plants have protein, but it's not the same protein. It's not the same structure of protein as the animal kingdom, and because they're two different things. We can't just not recognize the differences. We got to acknowledge the differences and then use these things in different situations, right? So, even the insects, a lot of I go back to my my roots, like my culture. So I talk about like the Mayans and the Mesoamericans, because I like to study them. And they ate a lot of insects. They ate like grasshoppers, they ate ants, and a big part and a portion of their diet was actually insects. So, and you could farm insects, and you're gonna see that now they're gonna start getting into like insect proteins. Like they already have like grasshopper proteins and stuff like that, because they can farm these animals in relatively small areas and create protein sources and calorie sources, in relatively small areas. So you're gonna see in the near future, they're already starting, but is it gonna become more popular to eat insects and different things like that? Eggs are super nutritional as well. I know people talk about, and it's been like my thing is just dispelling the myths, because the reason we're not embracing a lot of these things is because myths have been put out there and people regard them as facts. But I just want to set the record straight that what got us to this point is embracing all of this, is being in tune with all of this. That's the only reason that we're here, is because our ancestors and the ones that came before us knew how to utilize all these kingdoms. Yeah, now we have access to not have to do that, but there are repercussions to that because organisms require a great amount of time to go through changes in their environment. If you do the change too quick, and if you take out something too quick, there's going to be repercussions to that. So we have to understand that we want to keep some of the integrity of our ancestors and honor those traditions that got us here, because they do hold benefit to us, But I enjoy, like I got liver. This is frozen, but it's liver. It's a local beef liver, but I don't really eat the food for taste necessarily. Like I like to think of food as nutrition. So if that was the case, I'd just be eating muscle tissue, maybe like steaks and stuff all the time. But I like to eat the organ meats because I know there's more nutrient concentration in the organ meats, and that's what my body really needs, especially after all the years I did of fasting and cleansing my body. I feel like it's time for me to give my body that nutrition, because when you fast, you're basically running off of your body's own reserves, so you want to replenish that, because even as babies, we eat animal foods. When we eating the breast milk, the milk from our mothers, that's an animal food, because we're animals by our nature, and in the animal food is basically liquid meat. Basically, breast milk is liquid meat, and so you want to understand that if you do fast and do a lot of these things, you want to replenish that, and unless you have access to breast milk as an adult, but I would leave that for the children, because we have access to other animal foods, that can replenish that part of us, so that's just one thing to think about. Milk, I know not everybody's tolerant of lactose, but there's certain people in the world who have developed more of the enzyme to digest lactose, and you can actually build up that enzyme in your own body so you could digest more lactose, and you could look further into that. But I just want to say that's definitely a food source that you could tap into. And the fat as well. A lot of these animals, they have fat. And I know, like in Maine and in northern parts of the states, they hunt like bears, and you could use like the bear fat instead of cooking oil, you use that fat, but that's something that came from your land, from your area, from something that you harvested fresh. And I'm not going to talk about the moral or the side of it, like as far as morality and stuff, because that's irrelevant. I just want to outline what exists in this reality for us as far as nutrition. And if you want to tap into that, cool. You could tap into all of this, but I just want to say, like, wherever you're at, like, these exist, and you could tap into these food sources, So just be mindful of that, because, if you want to get closer to nature, this is where it has brought me, this is where my journey has brought me to just becoming aware of this. I used to try to, eat from only one kingdom or but I realized there's a lot out here that we could tap into, and we have been doing that. So I just honor that time-tested tradition of our ancestors, and that's what I think, got us here, and I think that's what we need to keep integrating, and always honor the land, always honor our environment, never take more than you need, and when you do take something, utilize it to the best of your abilities, and just have principles with it. You still have principles in life. To me, like, you always want to have those principles. Like, I think if you don't have the principles of local, organic, eating fresh, knowing your body, knowing how much to eat, doesn't matter what diet you have. If you don't have those principles, you're not going to succeed, or you're not going to thrive with that diet. And if you do have those principles, no matter what diet you have, you're going to make it work, because you're going to be so tuned in to your own nature that you're going to make it work. You're going to find ways to make it work. But for me, it's like, I just want to embrace everything. I want to embrace life, and I want to embrace everything that exists, and I want to become familiar with it. And so getting closer to nature has brought me to this point of wanting to have an intimate relationship with all of nature, in the physical form, and also myself, because the way I look at it, if I harvest an animal from the environment, life needs life to sustain life. So I just take a piece of myself to feed a piece of myself. And when I'm gone, other pieces of myself, which are like the cells and bacteria animals, they'll take pieces of me to continue their journey, so that's a spiritual component that I have when it comes to the animal foods. I think in many ways we can be more spiritual when we tap into this, when we become aware of this. We can be more spiritual when we aware of all that's going on in our reality, and we use all of it, because there's a big stigma that just because you eat meat that you can't be spiritual. But the most spiritual people that have ever existed, the people that have been the most in tune in existence, all ate animal products, and and they were just had a different perception of it, and therefore they experienced a different reality than we currently do. So that's it for now. That's been the 5 kingdoms, and so now we're just gonna go into some Q&A. Thanks for sticking by. If you're still in the room, if you're watching.